Hi and welcome to today's class. In this lesson, we are looking at the structure of the writing task 1 essay. You need to be able to logically organize and present the information you want to convey to the examiner, and the structure we are about to look at will help you to do exactly that, because this is important as far as your coherence and cohesion score is concerned. The writing task 1 essay has 3 parts: the introduction, the overview, and the body. Introduction, the overview, and the body. The task 1 essay has no conclusion. The job is done by the overview. We'll go into details and look at each of these parts of the essay that you're writing. The first part is the introduction, and the introduction is a paraphrased version of the description. For every task 1 question that you come across, by this I'm referring to the academic task 1 essays. For every task 1 question that you come across, there would be a description of the diagram that you have. Then the instruction part, which requires you to summarize and report the main features of the diagram. To be able to get your introduction, you need to focus on the description, paraphrasing that. And what do we mean by paraphrasing? You're saying the same thing that the description is saying, but then you're not using the same set of words. So how do you go about this? You can replace keywords with synonyms, words that are nearest in meaning to the keyword that you have, and you need to think about context as you do that. Then you can modify the class of the keyword. In English, we have the noun, verb, adjective, adverb class, and so on. You move it from one class to the other. Or even within the same class, you could move it from one part to the other. So if you're thinking about nouns, you could move it from a singular noun to a plural noun. For verbs, you could move it from the present to the past to the future, and what have you, when it comes to the class of that word. Then you can also add qualifying words. You can add a word or two to make the meaning of the keyword more explicit, to be easily understood. So you add a word or two. Then you can give examples also. You can give examples as far as the keyword is concerned. And at certain times, you may want to maintain the keyword. You don't want to distort the meaning because that keyword is too apt to be played with. You may want to just leave it as it is. Or probably the 4 options are not really working for you with regard to that particular keyword, and so you just maintain it as such. I think we quickly look at some examples of what I've just talked about. So we are looking at graph. If you're paraphrasing graph, you can add a qualifying word, bar, because this particular question we are looking at has a bar graph. So you bring bar before graph, it reads bar graph, and that makes it clearer what kind of bar graph the question is referring to. So the bar graph. This is adding a qualifying word. Then let's look at let's look at different. What can we do to different? We can add we can replace different with a synonym. We can replace that with a synonym, varied. It's a good synonym in this context. Then transport in this sentence is a noun. We can still be within that same class of the word and change it to transportation. So varied modes of transportation. Then we can also think about giving examples, still referring to modes of transport. So modes of transport or modes of transportation such as bus, car, bike, and foot. Then we think about leaving the keyword as it is. European, we can just leave the particular keyword and not do anything to it at all. So we've looked at adding a qualifying word. We've looked at synonyms with regard to different and varied. We've looked at European, maintaining the keyword. Travel, you can change it into traveling, and that changes the class of the word. Then modes of transport, you can give examples of that as we have just seen. So by this, you're paraphrasing the description of this particular diagram that we have to consider. When you're writing your introduction, you need to make sure that these 4 parts that you can see on the screen is there. You wouldn't have all 4 of them in every instance. The name of the diagram, the topic, these 2 would always be constant. Time frame, unit of measurement would depend on what you have in the description. So what do we mean by the name of the diagram? We've looked at types of questions that you encounter during the task 1, the writing task 1. And some have very specific names such as pie charts, bar graph, table, and whatnot. Others have very generic names such as just diagram, or let's say the process diagram. You need to be specific if it's possible. You need to mention the name of the diagram that you're looking at. And in this particular question that we are considering, the name is there, the graph. That is the name of the diagram. And we paraphrased it by saying the bar graph. Then you need to think about the topic. And this focuses on the central theme with regard to the diagram that you're looking at. The diagram always has a focus. It's writing on a specific subject. You need to focus on that also as you write your introduction. And this question is looking at the different modes of transport used to travel to and from work in one European city. That is the topic of this particular question, and you have to paraphrase that as you write your introduction. Then the next is the time frame, the period of time. And these could be quoted in varied forms. It could be days of the week, it could be months of the year, it could be years, it could be minutes. Whatever time frame, whatever period of time is given you, you have to also paraphrase that as you write the introduction. For this particular one, we are looking at 1960, 1980, and 2000. The time frame wouldn't always be there for every question. So you need to look out for it. If it's there, you paraphrase that. Then units of measurement. This tells us how the data collected was measured. Was it in centimeters, in meters, in kilometers, in minutes? How was the data measured? You need to look out for that and paraphrase that as well. For this particular question, it has no unit of measurement, and so we don't have to bother ourselves with it as we write the introduction for this question. This is the first part of your essay, the introduction. The next part is the overview. The next part is the overview, and the overview focuses on giving a summary of the information in general terms. It summarizes the entire information that you have in general terms, which means that it leaves out all the details, all the specifics at this point. The overview doesn't include specifics and details. you begin that using overall or generally. Once the examiner sees either of these two words, he or she knows that that portion of the essay is the overview. So let's look at how to write the overview for the types of questions that you have in IELTS, as far as the writing task 1 is concerned. We have the statistical information questions, like we know by now, dynamic and static. When you want to write the overview for dynamic statistical information questions, you focus on what's happening to the numbers within the period of time that you have. And numbers could increase, decrease, fluctuate, or remain constant. So your focus is on these four, or any of them which applies as you give the summary of the information. So for example, if you're looking at the modes of transport, this is a dynamic question. So what's happening to the usage of the 4 modes of transport with regard to the 3 different years that has been given to us? So for example, if you take what's happening to the usage of bus, you can see fluctuation, because it was at 20, moved up to somewhere around 27 in 1980, and then declined again, and then declined to somewhere around 17% in 2000. So that's a fluctuation. You think about car, you are seeing an increase in usage. For bike, there's a decline. The same thing happens to foot. So this is what you're doing when it's a dynamic statistical information question. Then if it's a static one, what do? You're looking at the 2 extreme points, the highest or the lowest, or the most and the least. Sometimes you deal with abstract terms, and so you have to focus on the major. For example, if you're looking at reasons why people cycle to work, numbers will be assigned these reasons. So you just focus on the major ones and report the number. So for example, overall, there are 3 main reasons why people cycle to work. If that is what you have in the question. Then if you're dealing with a process question, what do? You count the number of stages, the number of equipment, as well as the number of raw materials. You are just representing the number and not the specific names of the stages or equipment or raw materials. That is reserved for a different part of the essay. If it's an order question, we are looking at the number of levels. So overall, there are 4 main levels in the educational system of Ghana, if that is what we are looking at. You're not supposed to give specifics, remember that. And so you cannot give the names of the levels that you have in the question. Then we have cycle questions, looking at the stages. You count the number of stages in the life cycle of that organism, and then you report that number. So overall, there are 5 stages in the life cycle of humans or frogs or birds. You need to be able to count the stages, identify and count the stages to be able to get your overview right. It doesn't really matter the number that you get. You should be able to prove that when we get to the next part of the essay that you're writing. Then we come to map, shape, position, or plan questions. You need to report the most significant feature or features or change or changes. If there's just one map, one shape, position, or plan, then you're looking at the most significant feature. And you need to mention the name of that most significant feature, because that is not the detail. For example, if you take a plan, you've been given the plan of, let's say, a building. What is outstanding should be mentioned, because the details, the specifics would have to do with would have to do with describing the location of that particular feature. So for example, it's on the northern part of the river. if that is what you're seeing. So in this instance, remember to mention the specific name of the most significant feature or changes. Changes would be the same if you have two maps or plans in a particular question. If there are two or more, then you're looking at what is outstanding with regard to the changes or change that occur or that occurs. This is how to write the overview for all the types of questions that we have in IELTS. The last part of your essay is the body. And the body is supposed to support the claims that you made while you were writing the overview. At this point, you need to get all the main features of the diagram here. Give all the details, all the relevant details. Remember, you're supposed to summarize and report the main features. So forget about the irrelevant ones, forget about the minor features, focus on the main ones. As you support the claims of the overview, report the main features as well. And if it's relevant to make comparisons, you need to do that. You need to do that. So if you think about this particular question that we have looked at so far, on the modes of transportation used to travel in one European city in 1960, 1980, and 2000. If you're writing the body, you have to give the respective figures with regard to the usage. Then it's also very relevant for you to do comparisons. For example, look at what is mostly used in 1960, what is mostly used in 1980 and 2000. You're doing that comparison. You're looking at differences and similarities here and there. This should help you to do the comparisons that you're supposed to do. That is the structure that you need. At the beginning of the class, I mentioned that you don't need a conclusion because the overview does the job of the conclusion by giving a summary of what is contained in the in the diagram. Let's just recap very quickly what you've looked at in this lesson. We've looked at the structure, we looked at the body, the first part, which is the introduction, and that is a paraphrase version of the description. We moved on to the overview, which gives a summary of the information in general terms, then the body of the task 1 essay. Hope this helps you very much. If you have any questions, of course, you can get in touch with us via our lines or on the website to help you. See you in the next lessons.